always been fascinated by abandoned places, especially those I had a personal connection to. As a former medical student, I spent countless hours in the old hospital on the outskirts of the city. Years ago, the hospital had been shut down after a new, modern facility was built in the city center, leaving the old building to decay. Now, the hospital stood empty, a shadow of its former self. One day last fall, driven by a mix of nostalgia and curiosity, I decided to return and explore the place where I once trained. A photographer friend of mine agreed to join me, but when we got to the site, he felt too creeped out to go in. He said he would just stay around the car taking pictures from out here. I was surprised, but it was all good. I was not going to let that stop me from going in. The hospital was a giant empty shell, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. Weeds and vines crept up the sides of the building, and the front entrance was blocked by debris. I slipped through a gap in the fence and made my way inside. The air was thick with the smell of mold and rot. The silence was eerie. It made me think of a sunken ship, forgotten at the bottom of the ocean. The hallways were dark, and the wards were empty, their beds covered in dust and cobwebs. It was hard to believe that this place had once been filled with life and activity. As I walked through the crumbling hallways, I couldn't help but reminisce about the past. I remembered the busy days and nights, the patients and the staff, the echo of hurried footsteps, the beeping of machines, and the murmur of conversations filled my mind. I could almost see the doctors and nurses rushing by, attending to their duties. I even remembered how desperately tired I would get during those 24-hour shifts. My nostalgia was suddenly interrupted by the sound of faint, hurried footsteps. I stopped and listened, but the sound was gone. I continued exploring, making my way to the operating rooms. The surgical lights were still there, covered in dust. The once sterile environment was now a scene of decay and neglect. As I took pictures, I noticed fresh footprints in the dust on the floor. They were not mine. Someone had been here recently, and I realized they might still be here. Cautiously, I continued down the hallway of the ward, and that's when I caught a glimpse of a room that was clearly occupied. Part of me wanted to run screaming, but another part of me was drawn to the scene like a magnet, and I found myself peeking into the room. A made bed, a TV, a mini fridge plugged into the wall, a small garbage can half filled. Someone had been living here. Who would live in a place like this, and why? I suddenly felt completely exposed. The thought of someone hiding in the shadows, watching me, made me uneasy. As I carefully made my down the rest of the ward towards the exit, I passed a dimly lit room and saw a group of squatters. They were huddled together, their faces hidden in the shadows. They were led by a volatile and paranoid man. He spotted me and immediately became aggressive, shouting and accusing me of trying to take their refuge. His eyes were wild and his voice echoed through the empty hospital. He lunged at me with a broken piece of metal, and I barely managed to dodge his attack. The other squatters looked on, unsure of what to do. I knew I had to get out of there. I ran, through corridor after corridor and then down a bunch of stairs. The hospital was a maze of dark hallways and decrepit stairwells. I could hear the man chasing me, his heavy breathing and angry shouts getting closer, then further, then close, then further. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to find a way out. The hallways twisted and turned, each one looking the same. I stumbled over debris, barely catching myself before falling. The man's footsteps were getting louder, and I knew I couldn't slow down. I turned a corner and nearly ran into a pile of old, rusted machinery. I ducked behind it, trying to catch my breath. The man ran past, not noticing me. I stayed hidden, waiting for the sound of his footsteps to fade. All I kept thinking is that I had to get out of there. I peeked out from behind the machinery, checking to see if the coast was clear. The silence was deafening. I made my way to a nearby staircase, hoping it would lead me to an exit. The steps creaked under my weight, and I winced at the noise. I climbed quickly, my legs burning with the effort. At the top, I found another hallway. This one darker and more decrepit than the last. As I walked, I noticed more signs of someone living here. Empty cans, torn clothes, and even a broken radio. How many of them were there? Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see the man at the other end of the hallway, his eyes fixed on me. He started running towards me, his pipe raised. I bolted. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, each step feeling heavier than the last. I spotted a door up ahead and sprinted towards it. I threw it open and ran inside, slamming it shut behind me. I looked around and realized I was in an office. Desks and chairs were scattered around, covered in dust. I locked the door and moved a heavy cabinet in front of it, hoping it would buy me some time. I searched the room for another way out. In the corner, I found a small window, partially broken. It was my only chance. I climbed onto a desk and squeezed through the window. I felt a sharp pain in my leg as I fell to the ground outside, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. I limped away from the factory, hearing the man's screams fade into the distance. I made it to the edge of the factory and called my friend to drive over and get me. I needed to get to a hospital right away, a functioning hospital. I made it to the edge of the factory grounds and called my friend to drive over and get me. My leg throbbed with pain, and I knew I needed to get to a hospital right away, a functioning hospital. When my friend arrived, he looked worried but didn't ask any questions. He helped me into the car, and we drove in silence. I told the emergency personnel that I had suffered a bad fall while exploring. They examined my leg and confirmed it was broken. As they set it and put on a cast, I couldn't help but think about the men living in the old hospital. I knew I should report them, but I just wanted to forget the whole thing. My friend stayed with me through the ordeal, understanding my desire to leave the past behind. On the way back home, I realized how dangerous my urban exploring hobby had become. The experience was a wake-up call, showing me that I had been holding on to memories from my time at the old hospital for too long. Over the next few weeks, as my leg healed, I made a conscious effort to move on. I stopped visiting old abandoned places and focused on building a future. Surprisingly, I met someone special not long after. We started dating, and I found myself falling in love. It was truly interesting how life worked. That terrifying experience in the old hospital gave me the push I needed to let go of the past and embrace the future. I realized that holding on to memories was holding me back, and it was time to grow up and move forward.